All right, welcome back to Always on the Hunt. This week we have a special guest. The proverbial term of rock star gets thrown around a lot, but this person is a rock star, and if he wasn't in the AV industry, I have a feeling he would have become a rock star too. He is the purveyor of fun, and most of you know him, but let me bring in Peter Melvin. Peter, welcome to Always on the Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Leo. Quite the intro to live up to, but I really appreciate it, and looking forward to this conversation, bud.
Absolutely. When I started this podcast and I was thinking about like which guests I really want on, you were definitely on that short list because of your energy and your overall positive and optimistic outlook on things. So I was excited to share your story and your insights, and I think the listeners will get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm kind of like the puppy that doesn't know any better, right? Just keep coming back with the tail wagging in every circumstance. Yeah.
So purveyor of fun, that's your LinkedIn title. That's kind of become your personal brand. Tell me, like, what does that mean to you? Like, how'd you come up with that, and what does it mean to you personally?
Yeah, and look, thank you for asking. I mean, it's super important to me. It's kind of how I think of business. It's how I think of treating coworkers. It's how I think of treating customers. I learned a lot throughout my early part of my career of what I didn't want to be. If I ever got into a position of leadership or a position where I could help others, I learned very quickly from very bad bosses what I didn't want to be. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it checked off the list, right? I didn't want to be boring. I didn't want to be mean. Yeah. That's just not in my DNA. And every time I worked with other people, the people I gravitated to were the people that made my life fun and easy. And so it just became kind of as I was interviewing people and hiring people and got into a position of power of some kind, or leadership, I shouldn't even say power. I just wanted to make it fun. Yeah. And whatever that meant, it was super important that carried over in every touch I have with people. It's just super important to me.
And it's also important to hire the right people that can, actually still, do the work and not take advantage of your kindness, right? And your funness, right? Because sometimes you'll get you don't want to micromanage, but then you'll get an employee that you have to because they're just not self-motivated enough. Like, what do you do with in those situations?
Yeah, it's interesting that's a tricky balance, right? And I'll admit, I've never been perfect at that, right? At times, the fun can overshadow certain things. But look, I think if somebody just doesn't have that in their DNA, you have to find a role for that person because they're part of your work family that fits for them. And then if somebody really is going against the trend, you have to help that person find a different home. You don't want to, but it's interesting you bring up the hiring process, and I've made mistakes along the way for sure.
Sure,
but I think people make a huge mistake in the hiring process of finding that person that fits whatever category you find yourself in. And as the purveyor of fun, it's not like every day we can be super goofy. We got to get work done, right? But we can always find a way to make it fun, even though it's work. And finding that right person takes time. You got to be patient and you got to put work into it.
Absolutely.
And in order to find those right people, but carrying it over into business sometimes can carry over into life and make your life better. And that's always my goal. If you're a part of whatever I'm doing and your life isn't better at doing that with me, I hope I can find you do something else, because then we're not meant to be a part of each other's lives, right? And so it's really important that continue in every aspect that we do.
So your personal brand, right? Like when people talk about you behind your back, usually good things. usually good things, right?
Right. I'm sure it's always good. Yeah.
Right, but people talk about like your energy, your excitement, your fun, right? It's become your brand, right? The Peter Melvin brand. How important do you think that is to you to have that personal brand, or to develop a personal brand? Because many in our industry aren't, they don't have the personalities, or they're not well known, or they haven't branded themselves in any way. How important do you think it was for you to personally brand yourself? And then how important do you think personal branding is in general?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, right? I think it's important in the aspect of what you're going to say no to, right? So if your personal brand is you're the best engineer on the planet, or you're the best, accounting person, you're the best at this, or you want to hold yourself accountable to that, then you say no to the things that won't allow you to do that. Right. So when I look at these things that, I've been so lucky though to be in leadership where I can kind of control certain narratives. I can't control everything. We know that.
Yeah.
But I can control some narratives to where, if we're going to be positive in the face of negativity, if we're going to have fun in the case of extreme work challenges, you have to surround yourself with those people as well to keep that momentum. And truly, I've been so lucky over the last almost 20 years in the AV space. I've been surrounded by some of the best people.
Yeah.
And so the people around you also affect your brand. But I think when people are developing their brand, I think the one thing they forget, a lot of times you have to do certain things, but you can always say no to things that you think will impact you in a way that you don't want it to. And that's your biggest power you have in creating a personal brand. You just have to find the people that you want to associate with in your circle. Right. And you have to say no to things that'll just maybe not carry that momentum that you want to have forward. So I think it's really important that you, in whatever role you're in, not everybody can be jovial. Not everybody can love talking in front of people in a crowd like I do. Yeah. Right. But you can decide what you're not going to do to affect who you want to be and how you want to be recognized. That's for sure.
Right. It's something that I obviously take very seriously as well, is my personal branding and my my company's branding, right? Like to me, they're tied together, and for, yours is like fun and energy and obviously you create great results and stuff like that. For me, like it's like my biggest personal brand is like integrity and quality, especially like in the nature of work that I do. Obviously everyone's got to be very trusting of me that I'm not going to go share all their personal details that they share with me, right? So yeah, and you're right, you got to say no. And one of the things that I do, which I'm sure you do as well, is sometimes you fire some clients, right? Like people that are willing to pay you and say, here, take my money. And you're like, nope, we'll pass.
Well, I remember in our first interaction, we met, right? And we quickly got into each other's lives, right? It had very little to do about business, very little, actually, after, hey, I'm Leo, I do this, and I'm Peter, I want to do that, right? Then it just got into personal stuff, and there was an immediate connection there, right? And I knew from those conversations that you were someone with integrity, right? But you just mentioned and made my point, right? Your power of your personal self to say no, right? Yeah. And I'm not going to work with you. I'm not going to do this, even though there's money around it for you. It's a tough decision, right? You want to feed your family,
100%.
Take care of your future, especially in dynamic environments. Right. That is where I think people forget. That's what creates your brand. Yeah. What you don't do creates your brand just as much as what you do. Right. So
it's amazing the power of no, like how much, I play a lot of poker. So like, I think about the way you win in poker it's not about the hands you play. It's the ones that you don't play. Right. And same thing in business and customers. It's not about the projects you do. It's the ones that you walked away from and you said no to, the clients that you knew were going to be unrealistic and were going to hurt your reputation and hurt your resources and hurt your company morale. And so forth, right? So like, I'm sure, for the manufacturer side, you have some partners that, would love to sell your products, but you're like, you know what, you guys just don't represent our values.
It's interesting, between like two totally different personalities, right? Yeah. Like I'm the worst poker player ever, right? So you're talking about, guy, if I got a good hand, you're going to see me grinning in your ear to ear, right? Right. And so that's just not a thing that I would go to make money, right? Because I would suck. I'm too emotional. Right. So, and I'm usually just positive. So, or at least I try to strive in that direction. But you are right. Yeah. Anybody can create a personal brand. They can create a fake one as well. which never lasts.
Never lasts.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's got to be something that you create that is something you enjoy as far as what you're doing. And like you said, I'm sure there are plenty of people behind my back that think it's fake. Right.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think no. Like again, what I'm saying is like when people talk about you behind your back, it's usually positive. It's usually about like, man, that dude's got a lot of energy, got a lot of optimism. You're right. Look, there's always going to be haters out there, right? But I think you're touching on the right thing, that if you are genuine, that is your brand, right? Because we're all unique in our own ways, right? And as long as you're genuine, as long as you're true to yourself, as long as you're not selling yourself out or selling yourself short, you'll develop your own brand. Maybe it's not as out there as you developed or I'm trying to develop, but others, just by saying, hey, that person is solid, right?
Yeah. But to what you were saying there, though, there are going to be haters, right? No matter what you do, right? Always. I mean, you could be saving puppies every day. There's still going to be haters saying, oh, they're only doing this for attention. They're fake, whatever.
Right.
But you just have to be consistent with what you're trying to do. And the consistency really does come from how you carry yourself. And again, I haven't been perfect my entire career, right? At all.
Nobody has.
Nobody has. Right. And then at the same time, saying no to the things that could really hurt that. And people don't, even in little tasks. I find it so interesting when you're in a meeting, and some of the first meetings I have with people, I tell them, it's okay to tell me I'm wrong. It's okay to tell me, no, you work here with me because I want you to make me better. And you don't make me better by just saying yes, right? I mean, you make me better by using your powers as a human being and what you've learned and giving me your perspective. That's why we work together.
Right. And look, over the years, I've talked to a lot of your former colleagues and people, who worked for you. Man, it's amazing how your brand attracts other people with similar types of personalities and culture and energy. And it's when I think back to some of your previous teams, like the one that you had at like Herman, amazing team there. Yeah,
I'm flattered by stuff like that. And by the way, I rarely ever call myself a boss or leader, right? That's my team. That's my family. And granted, it's not my blood family, but it's my work family. And it's very important to me. And I'm flattered by those comments. I always find it interesting too. I love hiring people that have, amazing personalities, have a great heart and mind. And I hate saying this, but came from an environment that was bad. Right. What I love about that, I don't love the fact that they had to go through that. Let me just state that first. Right.
Yeah.
But what I love about that is, me just being a touch better, makes them think I'm unbelievable.
Set the bar low. Right. And
yeah. I mean, I hate when good people, get stuck in something where they have a bad environment.
Yeah.
And not only that, I want to say this too. It takes a lot of effort to fix an environment. I think when I want to go back to a point we said where there can be haters out there, I think a lot of people see the fun, energetic environment as a guy that works an hour a day and then goes and relaxes. Right. That couldn't be further from the truth. I've led by example. I'm the first one in, I'm the last one to leave, even though I don't talk about it. Right. I'm sending, I traveled, for 20 years, and for 17 of those, it was over 250 nights a year. I mean, it's just not, so that message that being able to have that fun and being able to do that stuff is because you work hard.
Yeah. You have to justify it, right? You can't just be this fun-loving guy that just has a great time everywhere and just wants to wine and dine clients and you need to perform, you need to have results, and which I think is a great segue. So let's talk about some of the results that you've experienced in your life, because I think that there's some nuggets in there that others can learn from. I want to start from the very beginning though. Like, how did you even get into AV? Like what drew you into this industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, my first my wife and I actually talk about this every once in a while. My first kind of love for AV, right, was I grew up without a wealthy family, but my family was kind of got more successful as I got older. And I remember my father getting a big TV, and then, like a year later, he got this big audio system. And I remember it was a Bose system with a Denon receiver, right? And he got all this stuff, and he was like, okay, now what the hell do I do with all this stuff? Yeah. And I was like, I'm like 12, or something. Like, I was so jacked to see this because I love movies, and I wanted to get this audio system working for my father, right? And so I learned all about it, read the whole manual, and then I got it all set up. And I remember the second we turned that thing on, and I was watching a movie in full surround sound, like it gave me goosebumps down my arm. It changed the whole experience for me. And I was like, what changed? Okay, the audio and the video. Right. And so as a young kid, that was kind of my first thing where I was like, I played piano and I was in choir, and like I always loved music and sound and all that other stuff. But that was like my first thing where I was like, I really like this tech. Yeah. Like, so that was my first like kind of thing that kind of was like, I'm interested in this tech, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, because you're describing my favorite moment of, when I was an integrator, my favorite moment of work, like what had me excited to go to work every day was the day we get to hand the remote over to the client and turn the system on, and you see this 40, 50-year-old, wealthy, successful client, just turn into an 8-year-old and just become all giddy and just like so excited. And you're just like sharing that joy and excitement with them. So I get it.
I've been on a couple commissioning things, obviously, over the years, right? Where somebody's commissioning work, and you are right. Like when they hit the button and the blinds go down and the audio comes on and the screen in the conference comes on, they're like, they just totally get into it.
Oh, my favorite used to be like when TiVo just came out, and I would turn the TiVo on for them for the first time, and they would think like I created TiVo. Like they would give it like this is the most amazing thing ever. Like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, like and
then you just hand the remote and you're like, I did this. I made all of it. You're welcome.
All me.
Yeah.
All me.
Let's hug it out. Hug it out. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you get into the AV world, obviously you start your career, I believe, at Milestone, right?
Actually, I had a 1 year at AverMedia. So I do have to tell you about that.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to get out of what I was doing. I was really doing well. I worked actually at Verizon Wireless, so a different form of tech. Mm-hmm. And I was, President's Club winner there and stuff like that. So I was a really lucky guy right from the beginning as far as selling stuff. Yeah. Right. I worked at a Mercedes-Benz dealership. I was the top salesperson there. And I saw this document camera, and I was like, okay, it falls under AV. I think it's really sweet. That a teacher, I always love school, a teacher can present this stuff to a classroom. And at the time, that was kind of earth-shaking kind of stuff, right? Yeah. It's kind of cool. Right. And so I spent a year at AverMedia, and I really loved the product, loved the brand, but I had an opportunity to go to Chief, which today is under the Legrand family. Right. And that really was my introduction. And I'm so thankful for it because I was surrounded by great people. That was really my big introduction into AV, and truly, I also learned a lot from that scenario because I had really bad leadership prior to that point. Right, and then I got to Chief, and I was surrounded by a well-organized, good leadership, good people around me. And I kind of learned really quickly that, hey, that's what I want going forward, and I love this AV thing. Right. That kind of was the kickoff for everything.
So let me ask you, because you mentioned Verizon, Mercedes, before you got into AV, and you're hitting, top sales, President's Club, obviously you did that in the AV industry too. Yeah. All right. Spill the secret. What's the secret to your success? What do you do different than everyone else?
I don't know if it's, I always think it's luck, quite frankly.
It's not luck.
Well, a little bit of luck. Okay, a little bit of luck. this is really stupid, but I started writing a book a long time ago, and it's called the Idiot CEO. And the reason I kind of learned this mythology through other people and through trial and error, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I started at Mercedes-Benz, this is a great example, okay? People would walk in the door, and the salesperson would introduce himself, ask them one question, right?
Right.
And then they'd start presenting the car, right?
Yep.
Whatever car it was, right? And I would see the person standing there just like, don't talk to me like I'm an idiot, right? You don't even know what I'm looking for. And I saw that and I said, okay, someone's really uncomfortable here. And so, and that's how they would train me to sell. You need to go over the 10 points of the car and this, that, and the other. And it just drove me nuts. I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to work with people. Right. So the next person I walked in the door, I brought them back to our lounge cappuccino maker, made them cappuccino because I asked if they want a cup of coffee. And then we just sat there and talked.
Yeah.
I would ask questions and I would learn. And then sometimes they wouldn't even test drive a car and they just buy it. Like, it was crazy. So I really have to go back to, I think one of the biggest challenges you have out there for people to be successful, right? Whether you're in leadership, and it doesn't even have to be sales, ask questions.
Yeah.
Be curious. Don't act like you know everything. And I truly believe that has led to not only me hiring the right people and teams and all that other stuff, but success. I don't like to be sold to, and I don't want to sell.
Yeah. Nobody does, right? Nobody wants to just be pitched features, right? And I think you are, indirectly hitting on something that, which I noticed our first call, or first time you and I have ever spoke, you went right into the personal, right? You're like, all right, we'll get to business, but let's connect on an individual level. And I think, and after that conversation, I'm like, I'm thinking back to like some of the other people on your previous teams who I've had, opportunity to work with, in different capacities and so forth. I'm like, all right, I see it now. Like they're all about the human connection first. Let's build that rapport. Let's get on that personal level. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think most people would say that people buy from people they like, right?
Right.
So it's a good tactic to like, hey, really don't skip over the establishing the rapport, stage, right?
Yeah, Leo, when you were working with some of the people that used to work with me, outside of that, what else did you notice? Like, I'm totally curious. Like, what else did you notice other than that personal rapport?
About your team?
Yeah. Just people that have worked with me.
Yeah. Culture, energy, right? Always a lot of outgoing, very, very outgoing. It's funny because like you and I think share a lot of, like, I don't have your personality. I wish I did, right? I'm more of an introvert. Here I am on a podcast, but trust me, this is very much outside my comfort zone. We're in a very technical industry.
Yeah.
And some people just think that being the most technical is the way to go. And I think that was the opposite. Like when I had my integration company, the name of it was Smile. And it was an acronym, but we were the Smile guys. And you can't say Smile guys without putting a smile on your face, right? And it broke down so many barriers. It demystified the whole home tech industry. So people didn't, they didn't get intimidated by us coming in and talking about, technology. They were happy. And I think that's a lot of what I saw from you and your team. It's like a lot of people that were more personality driven, relationship driven, and wanted to connect on that level versus just trying to be the most technical, knowledgeable, people out there.
I mean, you make that's a beautiful way to say it, because no matter how expert you are, right, there's going to be somebody better.
Right.
In every aspect of your life. The one thing that nobody can beat, right, is if there's a personal connection. Yep. And that doesn't mean the person has to be your best friend, right? I'm not asking, every human being I meet is not my best friend, but I can tell you one thing. I'm going to ask enough questions to figure out if, what you like to do, what your family situation is. I get it's so interesting to me, especially once I got into the AV world. I did find out very quickly that personality is something that was very lacking in AV. It was all speeds and feeds, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was copied on all these boring emails, and I was a part of all these boring meetings. And truly, what came about that was I couldn't take it.
Yeah,
I didn't want to be involved in that, and so it did create some challenges in the beginning because that's what the AV world was really used to. And where at Verizon, Verizon was a dynamic company. We were growing leaps and bounds. I mean, it was all about the show, really,
right.
At that time. And where I got into an industry that wasn't, but I did make it that way with AverMedia. And then in my corresponding role with Chief, and that's what allowed me to break a lot of other people's goals and barriers and all that other stuff. But like, I always think that if I'm talking to you and I leave that conversation and I can't follow up with you on one personal thing, I mean, that's my fault. I didn't ask enough questions. And quite frankly, I don't want to talk to you again if I don't know anything about you.
And I think that's the secret. Peter, sorry if I'm giving away your secret, but it's the confidence to be yourself and to be genuine and to be a person and not try to be this vanilla corporate, technical person. You got to stand out. You got to be different. Otherwise, so many of these products are splitting hairs, right? Like you work for Chief. There's 5 other mounting companies that are all high quality. I get it. Chief might have had something better here or there, but they're all high quality, right? So why would someone buy a Chief mount instead of, the other brands? And obviously it's because of Peter, right? Because they want to work with Peter, and that was the way we trained our salespeople. We literally said, sell yourself first, sell the company second, sell the experience third. If you get into the future, just pack your things and get up and leave. Like don't even.
Yeah, I would even. So my model would be very different than that. Don't even sell yourself. Get to know them.
Right.
Be curious.
Right. Which is what I mean by that. But
be curious. Be stupid. Yeah. Don't be the expert. Right. Act like you know nothing every room you walk into. That way you can learn something.
Yeah, that's easy for me and you, right?
Yeah, very easy for me. Right. There's no doubt.
Me too.
My wife tells me every day I don't know much. So So right. I mean, I truly, I do a lot of sales training for the teams I've had over the years. And I've had a lot of assistance with that with people I've worked with, specifically Stephen McKay, who was my, hand-in-hand partner at IAVI. He created, with some help from me, but he primarily created this amazing sales training that just gets you to think in a questioning format rather than a sales format.
Right.
And it really allows the freedom to. There's 3 things it creates. It creates momentum because you have a personal connection, right? Mm-hmm. Like the second time we talked, I asked about your family. I asked about a recent holiday. I didn't even ask about what was going on with the business, right? Because Absolutely. We talked about that. And it creates fun because you can be yourself. It's hard to be, I've said this forever, it's hard to be a person at work and a person at home. It's why would you want to carry that kind of baggage? Be who you are.
100%.
And then at the same time, if you feel confident in what you're doing, it also allows to have fun because you don't have to BS your way through what you're doing, right? Yeah. Which is just gross. And so being the expert walking into the room serves you no purpose until someone asks you to be that or wants you to be that in the moment you've made that connection. So yeah, I just think that being curious and not thinking too much of yourself is so important in any industry, whether you're a leader or not.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
And don't be afraid to be different. People like different. People like unique.
Yeah.
If you're quirky, that's good. It's good to be weird. So like, I used to live in New Orleans, and now that city more than any other city I know really celebrates people being weird, right? Like, and the weirder you are, the more that, like, it's funny. One client once told me, is like, if somebody's normal, I don't trust them. They're hiding something. Like, everybody's weird, right? So it's like,
yeah, I've gotten that before where people are like, man, I just don't trust somebody as happy as you. And I'm just like, really? I didn't know that was a problem.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, whatever you are, be that. I mean, I think the one thing I've done with my teams is I empower them to be themselves, and I praise it and encourage it. Or at least I attempt to in every step that I can too. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about your teams, because after you set records and broke records and, hit every goal possible, you moved on into leadership roles with two different distributors, right? And tremendous growth there. Hockey stick curve, right? 400% growth over 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it was. But you got both of them to get acquired. I think that is something that's really, that's a huge achievement. I don't think a lot of companies in our space, there has been, quite a bit of M&A action, over the years, but to build a company to get to the point where someone's like, I love what you're doing, I want to buy you. Right. So
or stop growing so fast that it makes us look bad, we're going to buy you.
Right. So talk about that. Like what was the mindset? Was that the plan to begin with? Was like, hey, we're going to put out this 3-year plan to get acquired, or, what was the mindset? Or was it just like you guys just were doing your thing and they came calling?
Well, I want to make a couple points first. No, the intent was not to, nobody thought we would grow at that kind of pace.
Right.
First, right? And the intent of the leadership and ownership of those companies was not to sell anytime in these kind of record-breaking paces, right? So that was not the intent. That wasn't, I was brought on for these companies that, for lack of better words, had been stuck at a certain volume for an extended period of time and didn't have the bandwidth or the time to bring the workload that it takes to grow a company that fast, to hire like that, to interview at that capacity, to bring on partners at that capacity and momentum prior to coming on board. So the first point is no. The first conversations of me coming on board wasn't, hey, we're going to break every record known to man and we're going to sell in 3 years, right? It was, hey, we're good people. We love to have fun and we have the right idea here in bringing you on board, but we're stuck. We're stuck. And that was really the mentality on both these situations. And I'll add, if I wasn't surrounded by awesome, amazing people, none of this would have happened, right? None of it. So even though I might have led parts of this, the kudos goes to the people and the entire team's doing the work.
So, go ahead. Go ahead. Go finish. Go ahead.
No, I want to know what your question was next.
Well, I was going to say, you walk into these situations, two of them very, very similar.
Very similar, Leo, but very different at the same time.
But they're both stuck, like you said. They're stuck, and I think a lot of companies hit those plateaus and they don't know how to break through. What was involved? Was it just, you coming in and being that spark plug? Was it, I know you gave credit to your team, which I understand. Obviously, you need a good team to, execute your plans and so forth like that. But was it just that jolt of energy, or was it a different go-to-market strategy, or what do you think you guys did, or what did you bring that made that happen?
Yeah. So if I just said it was because of my good looks,
right?
Do you agree with that?
Nobody would believe you.
Damn it. Yeah. Okay. I was hoping that would be the easy answer. Right. So I think it's kind of, let me state this. So for both companies, when I came on board, I didn't focus on sales at all. Not at all. I came in and learned everybody's role at the company. So if you worked in the warehouse, if you worked in marketing, if you worked in customer service, whatever, I worked with you and I learned what you did. I learned what was good about what you did. I learned about the challenges of what you did. And so I looked at the business from an operational standpoint and I said, okay, based on what we're doing now, is it good? If we did 10 times more business, could we do it? And so we immediately made changes there, right? And so I think that's the difference. A lot of people will hire a VP and they'll be like, okay, I need to hire 10 salespeople.
Right.
I want to grow sales. Well, you can't grow sales unless you can service it and service it in a good, fun way. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I wanted to empower. I wanted to empower those teams first. And then I'll tell you, Leo, the funny thing is how I looked at the businesses and that were stuck. IABI is a great example. IABI was kind of in between that $40-50 million ballpark from a revenue standpoint, top line for an extended period of time, right? They had experienced some growth. They, definitely went from zero, right, to that $40-50 million mark, which is a big achievement, right?
Right. Huge.
But what we did was we just focused on less. Our salespeople had 100 accounts. You can't service 100 accounts. What if you only had 10? What could we do with your favorite 10 that you work with?
So the old 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah, it's not even 80-20. I just want you to work with your buddies that you like working with, right? And what can we do there? And then how can we bring on lines to support it? And then how can I hire the right people that work with the already performing people and don't mess it up? And so, yes, there's an enormous amount of work that goes into that. I don't think people get it. Like when you start running a company that's nationwide, the amount of work there that people don't see to fix operations, to make the leadership team work together, to get everybody communicating, the amount of emails and talks, good and bad, you have to have there. We had to have those. And then from there, it was full speed ahead. Yeah. I started there. We had 12 outside salespeople. When we sold, we had close to 40, right? And that's a 3-year span. I don't think only person that gets this is Wade Gilbert, Stephen McKay, and a few other people that were part of the ride at IABI.
Right.
When we went from a $40 million company to a $200 million company, not in 10 years, like we did it in 2 years. Like that is nuts. Nobody's been a part of that ride other than some tech startups, right?
Right.
And we were distributor. Distributors technically are the slow growing parts of business. So there's so many moving factors, Leo. But the main focus that we did after I learned how we had to fix operations and then get the operations team on that is we did a lot less. We had stronger relationships with a lot less people. And then when people came on board, we didn't say, hey, focus on these 100 accounts. We said, focus on these 2, focus on these 3. See if and in 6 months, maybe you add a couple more, right? I mean, it was just such a hard focus on people that really wanted to work with a distributor that cared, that worked with a distributor that wanted a relationship. And it seemed like the more we focused on less, the faster we grew. Right. It was crazy.
Well,
just crazy.
Yeah. It's building a stronger relationship, building them deeper instead of wider. Right. And going after, it makes sense to me completely. Right. Because, when you look at your teams, though, you're building these teams, you went from 12 to 40 in a short period of time. You're interviewing. What are you looking for in these interviews? What has to jump out? Right.
I feel like for the last 13 years, all I did was interview. Like that's it, right?
Right.
And it's funny, I'm always interviewing between those things. So if I can give anybody advice in regards to interviewing, when you're looking for certain roles, especially outside sales, right? Have tons of multiple touches with that person, right? Don't just have an hour interview, make a decision, and then hope that person's the right fit. That is the worst strategy. I've seen it done before. That's why I don't do it today. Right. I typically somebody else will interview that person or multiple people. Then they'll get to me and we'll have an initial 1-hour chat. Right. Then after that, I'll follow up with if they don't follow up with a thank you, I never follow up with them ever again.
Right.
Right. Ever. I mean, if you can't have these simple, basic human things, I'm not going to teach you to be a human.
Right.
Right. Then I have then I'll reach out to them just out of the blue, phone call. Right. I want to see if I'm getting the same person. Then I'll have other people interview that person to give me feedback. And you're like, well, how can you do this when you're hiring that many people? You have to do it.
Right.
You have to, or else you're going to hire the wrong person. And especially on certain roles, you better sit there and break bread and want to spend time with that person. And that person better want to spend time with you, because if they're a part of your team, my goal is that I'm not their boss, right?
Yeah.
I'm training them a little, and then I'm here to support them, but I don't want to be their boss.
Right.
Right. I want them to be the person that I interviewed and continue being that person in an environment where they can succeed with operations that support them. And then from there, they do their thing. And then the team takes care of it from there because the team's there to support each other as they have more fun and success together.
Right. And they hold each other accountable too, right?
100%. Nobody, we've always been transparent about numbers. I hate hiding numbers. So if somebody's doing well, you applaud them. If somebody's doing bad, we try to lift them up, but we share, right? Because in moments, things can be good and bad. But my teams were exceptional at that. And maybe that was part of my culture and fun dynamic. Maybe it's the part that I cared about each one because I asked them questions rather than told them what to do. Mm-hmm. But my teams did an amazing job supporting each other, being their own family. I used to have my salespeople would send gifts to the customer service people without me knowing. I'd come to the office one day in Florida and, I'd be like, what's this? And they'd be like, oh, they sent me a gift because I helped them the other day. And, and it was for something personal related, right? I'm like, that's beautiful. It's exactly what I want to happen.
Exactly. I had a rule at my old integration company that the salespeople were not allowed to visit the job site without either ice cold Gatorades or hot coffee, right? Like if during the winter you bring out a hot coffee, during the summer bring some cold Gatorades.
Show some love.
Yeah, you got to show up and show appreciation, right? These are the people that are making you look good, so appreciate it.
I had a sales team. They came in and they had these custom shirts made, for all the people in service. So but I didn't ask them to do that. It's because I hired the right person.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And that creates that environment.
Yeah. And that's something that, we got into a little bit on the last episode about hiring culture instead of resumes, right? You look at the resume and they need to have enough there to make them, viable, but then it really gets into the culture. And like one of my favorite sayings is, your biggest ability is likability, right? People have to like you. They have to be able to see themselves wanting to go on a road trip with you or go to the trade shows with you and spend time with you. Cause you spend 8 to 10 hours a day at work, right? You want to be around people you enjoy.
Yeah, that's why I always say people, somebody asked me recently, actually, they're like, how do you always try to make it fun when it's so hard, right? And I was like, I know it's hard, but, we have to lift each other up to keep it fun. But yeah, you're 100% right. Hiring is so important. Firing is also important too. If you have one person that's diminishing 10 people's hope of having fun at work, you got to fix that. And, that's a big challenge for me because Pete loves love, right?
Right.
So firing somebody is not in my kind of DNA, but everybody, but it's also, I have to look at it for the higher interest of the people that are, producing and being the right person I want them to be.
100%. You can't have somebody who's going to undermine the team, ruin morale, and then also have you lose credibility of why you're keeping them, right?
Right.
If you got 9 people that are rowing this same direction, one person isn't, the other 9 are going to start looking at you, be like, hey, are you going to get rid of this guy or what? So let me ask you, obviously you've helped a lot of people, you've mentored a lot of people, you inspire a number of people. Who inspires you? Like when you think back to your career, like who lifted you up? Who showed you the way?
Yeah, there's obviously, I come from an amazing family, so I want to make that very clear. I have 2 parents that are kind, loving, friendly to all human beings. My father unfortunately passed a long time ago, but my parents were the kind of people that would literally give the shirt off their back. And I mean that, like even more so than me, to help somebody. And they were always kind in the face of challenges. And so I saw that growing up, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest factor of why I try to lead in this way. Right. I grew up around it. It made me feel good. And I just liked it. Simple as that. And then I told you about a lot of bad bosses. Right. And so those people don't need names, but they taught me a ton. Right. They taught me exactly what I never want to do with work or with people. Right. Mm-hmm. But I've had great ones, too. And I want to make that very, very clear. I've had great partners in IBI with Stephen McKay, Wade Gilbert, and that whole team behind that. Great partners. And then at Herman Pro AV, I had great partners not only within leadership with Jeffrey and David Wolf, the brothers that were the original owners of Herman Pro AV, and just had some magic with those people. But going back to my past, right? The first good boss I had was a gentleman, and I don't know what he's doing today. I haven't stayed in touch with him, unfortunately. There were two guys. One was at Verizon, one was at Mercedes-Benz, right? And so early on in my career, after all these horrible people I worked with, George, who was the general manager of Mercedes-Benz, he's a big, burly guy. He was a lineman for Penn State, played a little professional football, right? And he took over from this general manager that was just mean, right? For lack of better words, just mean. And he came in, and I remember when I walked into his office, this big guy, I'm not a small guy, right? And this guy's big, right? I came into his office. He's like, get over here. And he gave me this huge hug, right? And I was just, I don't know what it was, man. I'm a 20-something-year-old kid, right? Yeah. I was selling a lot of cars, and this guy was a jerk to me. And then this new general manager who I'm meeting for the first time just gave me a hug, right? Patted me on the chest, and he sat me down on the couch rather than behind his desk. And he said, hey, man, where are you from? Where's your family live? Are you married? Where'd you go to school at? You got any hobbies outside of this thing? I was like, holy smokes, this is unbelievable. Yeah. I just thought it was such a great approach. I loved working with him. I sold even more for him. Right. And he always kept it fun. He always kept it fun. I'd come to his office with a deal falling apart, and he'd be like, calm down, baby. And he'd tell me a joke. Right. And it was just great. And he was always kind about it. And then I had a gentleman, the reverse of that isn't in regards to the fun, but it was in regards to the work ethic. I had a gentleman that I worked for at Verizon. His name was Pat LaSousa, right? And Pat was a redheaded Italian guy, and he was the most intense human being I ever met, right? Ever. Right. And he was always on tilt, right? Just always. He was ready to explode, but he never exploded, right? But he worked harder than anybody I've ever met in my life. If you called him, he answered. If you emailed him, he answered in 2 seconds. If you texted him, he answered in 2 seconds. If something was wrong, he fixed it fast. It was unbelievable. And because he did that, he made it fun for me, right, as the employee. And it made me feel important. And he had hundreds of people that worked for him. And I just, those combinations of somebody that was fast, intense, loved his work, had a passion for fixing stuff, and worked all the time. I don't know if, I swear he was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I worked for him for 2 years. And I never, ever was delayed in hearing a response from him. And then I had George, who taught me that, kindness and fun at work is okay. So that combination of those two kind of formulated this kind of theory around what I do today. Right. And then my personality, obviously, as you know, Leo, tends to that, questioning, humorous, fun. Right. But what people don't see because of that is that intense work ethic that just drives me, and I just love it. Right. So I actually love working. I think that's a unique quality. Absolutely. For some people.
Yeah. Look, we work hard, play hard. You got to love what you're doing. So, and it sounds like those two. You put them in a blender, and you get Peter, right? So,
well, I hope I'm not compared to the one too much, but but for me, he was everything I wanted, right, at that time.
Yeah, you need the yin and the yang, right? The intensity with the fun and so forth. So what's going on now? What are you up to? You recently joined SoundTube. Tell the listeners what's going on over there.
Yeah, thanks for asking, man. Yeah, so in January of this year, I took over as the VP for SoundTube. Very similar situation as before. So not a distributor, right? Mm-hmm. Manufacturer of audio. And so SoundTube, just so you know, when I was running Herman Pro AV, we were SoundTube's largest partner. So I have a long history with them and their products and solutions. And once we sold Herman Pro AV in 2020, and then in 2023, I decided to do some consulting work and step away for a little while. I kind of have stayed in touch with a few different businesses, this being one of them. SoundTube has a ton of history in the audio space, but it's still a privately held, family-owned business based in Kansas City, Kansas, and they make great stuff. And I wanted to come on board here because of the same thing I've experienced before. You have a company that does great things with good people, right? That just hasn't been able to figure out an operational structure and kind of a message out there to grow. And so my goal there is to fix that, just like I fixed other things in the past, and have a ton of fun with customers out there to hopefully partnership with our business with theirs and grow.
Nice.
I do have to say one thing, though. The one thing about SoundTube that has always stuck in my head, right? We went from zero in distribution of SoundTube to almost $1 million very quickly at Herman Pro AV. And I mean fast with SoundTube. And the one thing that I always remember about the brand, some brands we did, 15, 20, 30, whatever millions with those brands. We had over 60 brands at Herman.
Right.
But the one thing that we never had any returns. And so it was always one of those things where I was like, I always saw it on like our data sheets, at the end of the month. And, you'd have, X brand, 5 million in sales and, 4% returns or 8% returns, whatever. It was always zero. And it always stuck in my head.
That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so SoundTube has always been around for that. But my goal here is to do something similar, even though it's the manufacturing side. We make great products. We make a lot of products here in the U.S. And we want to partner with people to have some fun and grow our business, and just no different than anything before.
Great.
That I've done.
Awesome. So let me ask, last question, and then we'll wrap up. But you're an optimistic guy. Right now economy's a little tough. Tariffs, all these different headwinds. When you look at the AV industry right now overall, like, what are you optimistic about? What are you excited about?
Yeah, great question, because I do love AV. I want to make that very, very clear. Like when I go into Salesforce Park here near me in San Francisco and see that video wall with the waterfall effect,
amazing.
And every once in a while they make the noise go off. I mean, I still get goosebumps. Right. So, look, in regards to the dynamic situations that we as private entities cannot control, right? We have to focus on the things that we can control. I've said it a million times in management meetings and other things where we look at competition, where we look at what the government's doing, what competitors are doing. We can't control that. So we have to move forward knowing that. So I think there's a lot of companies, as you know, Leo, out there making really rash decisions on not much information right now. And I find that very interesting. And that's not a position I'm ever going to be in. I'd rather not make a decision than make a decision I think that's not good, in my opinion. So I think in that world, you have to focus on what you can focus on. Stop getting lost in what you have no control over, and do what's right, not only for your business, but for your customers. And that's what we're trying to do right now. In the AV space, it's such a dynamic space right now, right? You had COVID, then you had the work from home, right? Then you had to make these safe work environments. Then you have people coming back to work now in an office environment.
It's been a turbulent 4 or 5 years for sure.
And it's not going to stop.
No, you got to get used to it. Got to get used to it.
Yeah, I think right now we're in one of the most opportunity-rich environments. And I would say for a company like SoundTube right now, we're in the most competitive, rich environments we've ever had. Because as a private business where we make our own decisions, there's a lot of these companies that we compete with that are public, that are private equity, and those people are going to make decisions based off of spreadsheets a lot of the time, rather than the human factor or what's right for this vertical, especially if they're in multiple verticals. And I think that leads us to have a really good opportunity here. But I think AV has never been in a better situation because of the dynamic situation we were in. And we are in, and are going to continue to be in what appears to be a long time to come.
Well, that's very, very sage advice. Focus on what you can control, and just keep doing the right thing for your customers, and things tend to work out.
Yeah, and Leo, back to our previous point, say no.
Right.
If it doesn't make sense, don't do it.
Yep.
I think that's the most beautiful thing that, people can do.
Just say no. Right.
Yeah.
All right, Peter. Well, look, I really appreciate all the time. I think we've had a wide-ranging, great conversation. I'm hoping the listeners are gaining a lot of valuable insights from you and your career and what you've been able to accomplish. It's been a heck of a ride, and obviously you've only just gotten started. So it's going to be great to watch the next 20, 30 years of your career and keep going from there. Thanks again for coming in, and to the listeners, if you're still here, thank you for listening. Please hit the like, subscribe, 5-star ratings will be appreciated as well. Share with your friends and colleagues, and for everyone, have a great week and good luck with your hunts.